This wine was bottled nearly 100 years ago. We're gonna open it up, see what's inside. Hey, I'm Sommelier André Hueston Mack, and today we're gonna be tasting a 94-year-old wine. I think there's a lot of excitement around a bottle this special. It's 100 years old. To me, I start to look at a lot of like history and like what was going on when the wine was made. Most wine is actually supposed to be aged anywhere from 5 to 10 years. But there's also special wines from special areas that you could age the wines for 50 years. Wine can definitely get too old. And so we have our fingers crossed with this one to see if it's still stands the test of time. I love drinking old wine. I'd have to say that it takes a little bit of time to get used to it. It is an acquired taste in a way. We're opening a time capsule, right? So this is going to transport us to France, to Bordeaux. So this is from Bordeaux. This is from the left bank called Micah. Within that, there's a sub-region called Saint Julien, and this is Château Brainaire-Cucru. So, and this is 1928. This is considered one of the greatest vintages in Bordeaux. So you can imagine that this wine is pretty coveted. 28 was very dry, not a lot of rain, and pretty perfect growing conditions for this particular vintage. So what we're gonna drink and taste today was really dependent on what the weather was like almost 100 years ago. So it's a really, really special moment. What this bottle of wine cost upon release back in the 20s, I would probably say somewhere around $3 to $5. $3 to $5 almost 100 years ago was expensive. I know I'm gonna get killed for saying this, but like, this represents value at a nearly 100-year-old bottle of wine that you can get for $800. Now, granted, I understand that most people couldn't even fathom spending $800 on a bottle of wine, but in that realm, that's why it creates a value. A bottle of 1945 Bordeaux went to auction for $150,000. I'm excited to open this up. All right, so I think at first we're gonna do a little visual analysis on the wine and just kind of take a look at it and see what we can tell from there. I think the first thing that I see when I look at it is that it's dirty. I wouldn't be alarmed by that. I think that's kind of a good thing. It is pretty old. I would expect that it was in some dark cellar. Looking at the label, it has everything that's supposed to be on the label. So it has the vintage, 1928. So it has the name of the Chateau Brainaire-Cucru. It has the regions that it's from, Saint Julien, from the Micah region of Bordeaux. It's in pretty good condition, just looking at the label and tack in the bottle and everything. You know, sometimes I've seen labels that are, that are moldy or have fallen apart or stuff like that. Also, looking at the bottle a little further, it looks like it was wrapped in saran wrap. You see these little striations here. These are actually from it being wrapped in saran wrap. Saran wrap doesn't really do anything to the wine inside. It's more about preserving the label and the integrity of the label, which tells you the vintage. Other things that I look at here, it has a foil on it, still intact, except for the top. If you look here on the top, seems like it's come undone a little bit here, but that doesn't worry me at all. I think for me, what I would really be looking at is if there was any seepage or leakage. If you detect some type of seepage, normally that would mean that there was a fluctuation in heat or something like that the wine started to expand and seep through the cork, and that's not a good thing. In my opinion, it looks like it's been stored in a consistent temperature. I would probably say the most surprising thing is the what we call the ullage. So where the actual wine sits in the bottle. In a lot of wines, you'll see, the ullage kind of fluctuate, not a lot, but there's some evaporation over time. This is pretty remarkable considering that it's nearly 100 years old. The interesting part about like this label in wines from France, they don't talk about the grape varietal anywhere on the label. So you have to know a little bit about wine to kind of know what you're getting. In Bordeaux, we know that we can get a blend of 5 different grapes. Bordeaux has a sense of place and where it comes from. And so you're allowed to use these different grapes, and it's more like, the chef making a pasta sauce because it's all to taste. And in Old World and definitely in Bordeaux, a lot of times it's about taste, and they use those 5 different grapes to be able to blend in to create the taste and style that they want to make. So now that we've finished the visual analysis, I'm super excited. It passed the test, and now I'm excited to open it. There's a little bit of preparation that you have to do if you're going to drink any old bottle of wine, but definitely something this old. You want to make sure that the bottle has been standing upright for at least 24 hours. Most bottle of wine, they tell you to store it on its side, and that is correct. But 24 hours before you want to drink it, you want to stand the bottle upright, so all the sediment falls to the bottom of the bottle. So that makes decanting it a lot easier. If we pick this bottle up and turn it on the side and turn it back, we just mix the sediment in with the wine, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So now we're going to open the wine. I just want to cut on the side of the foil. So all of these foils contain lead, so you don't want the wine to come in contact with lead. This looks pretty loose and can come right off. I want to take my serviette and kind of just wipe off the top and around the sides here. See what we see. No seepage on the top part of the cork, so that looks great. So pretty clean, no mold, nothing seeping out. We have our special wine opener here called a Duran, made specifically to open old wines like this. Before this existed, which is called a helix, this existed. This is called a butler's friend. It is a wine opener that slides itself on either side of the cork in the bottle, and you kind of wedge it down in like this, and then twist and turn, and you can pull it out. And then you have the helix in the middle to make sure that you grab all the cork. So we'll go ahead and insert the helix here. So I'll just screw that down. So we're just gonna insert the lasso on either side here. And then in that motion, we're just gonna kind of rock back and forth. So it's just sliding down in between in the neck of the bottle and the cork. You know, the wine has been in here for almost 100 years. The cork is kind of attached to the side, and sometimes that's really hard to break. So if you're just using an old corkscrew and you screw it in and you go like that, it just might rip out the middle part of the cork, and then it starts to crumble and fall in. So this is one way to be able to separate the cork from the bottle, and then also the helix keeps it intact. And see what's inside. You guys ready? I feel like this is like Geraldo in the Capone tomb. All right, so we're just gonna pull and turn, pull and turn. So that went great, no breakage. So that's gold. The cork's intact, looks great. There's some seepage on the side, but like not all the way through the top, so looks like it was stored properly. I can smell the wine, which is a good thing. It actually smells like wine, so that's great. If it was cork, a lot of times you can get a whiff of that. I don't get that yet. That doesn't mean that we're free and clear yet. We won't know that until we actually taste it, but those are some signs that feels like we can move forward. Next up, we're gonna decant the wine. Sediment you might add, you know, it's kind of the sea monkeys or the crunchy things on the bottom. They won't kill you, they won't harm you. It just makes the wine taste granular. And those particles that you find in the bottom are generally the phenolics in wine, mainly tannin. And as the wine ages, they kind of collect together and then they fall out of the wine to the bottom. We'll need a light source here. And I'm just gonna use my phone. And so by illuminating the neck, it just shows us once the sediment starts to flow. And then once it gets close, then we'll stop pouring. So when you want to decant an older wine, it's generally to remove the sediment from the wine to have a more pleasurable drinking experience. There's the sediment, and voila. I think we're good to go. It smells like Bordeaux. So looking at that, just brick red color. It's pretty clear, free of debris. As a wine ages, the color tends to fall out, it becomes a little bit lighter. So you can definitely see that it's light in color. There's cream de cassis. It's a little bit of graphite. Kind of reminds me of like when I was in 3rd grade going up to sharpen my pencil. Leather, a little bit of like sage and a slightly herbaceousness. All right, so it passed the smell test. I think we should taste it. I like it. I think, so I'm not gonna make any excuses for it. Generally speaking, you know, you'll age a wine in order to kind of reduce the kind of the fruity elements, to kind of expose other elements of the wine. And some wine you can overage and you lose those things, you end up losing fruit. This wine has lost a little bit of fruit. It, to me, would be a little bit more pleasurable if it had more fruit, but I can respect it for what it is. I would serve this to anybody who ordered it. I think it's amazing. This is cool. This is cool to be able to experience. Consuming and drinking and appreciating old wine is a very different experience than drinking young wine. There are some characteristics of fruit, but it's less fruit and kind of more, you know, more like a little bit of underbrush, wet dirt, mushroom. But also it has the, to me, I can always smell that it's old. I can always smell it because it smells like a little bit of soy sauce to me. What I really enjoy about the wine is that it's still intact. It still has some acidity to the wine, expressiveness of this particular wine. 8, 9, I mean, it's expressive, but just not in the way that I thought it would be. I thought a tad bit more fruit, but this is an awesome wine. With a wine this old, you know, you really have to pay attention to how long it's been open. Oxygen is the enemy. It starts to attack a wine and break down the particles in wine. A wine this old, it could turn it into vinegar pretty quickly. It's been open for about 10 or 12 minutes, and the wine kind of has taken on a little bit different character. Now I get like a little, like cola, like sarsaparilla. The leather is still shining through. There's some cedar, like from a cigar box. And on the palate, you get, you know, you gotta kind of get like this, you get some acidity on the sides. It still has like the core kind of sweetness of the fruit, but it's not, you don't taste a lot of fruit up front. It doesn't expand across the palate, which is great. I mean, even for a wine this old, I wasn't expecting that. Something like this, you probably wouldn't want to leave in the glass for a long time or in the decanter. It's evolved as probably as much as it's going to evolve. Within 45 minutes, you're probably going to get the best example of this wine. Anything after that, I would think that it would fall apart. So now that we tasted this 94-year-old bottle of wine, we actually have a bottle of wine from the same producer, produced in 2009, and so I think we should open that up and compare and contrast. This is the same Chateau. So as you can see, 2009, the labels look very similar. All right, so we'll go ahead and prepare the same way. A little rock. And we got everything out. We can turn them on the side. So if we look at the 2009, so that has like a watery rim on the outside. That's called a meniscus. And that indicates that the wine is youthful. And you don't have one here on the 1928. So if you swirl and look at the glass here, and you can see how fast the teardrops form, or the legs form, and how fast they fall, that means that the wine is high in alcohol. So then if you look at the 1928 as we swirl, you see how it's taking a very long time for them to fall and to form. It means it has less alcohol. So alcohol is also one of those phenolics that will tend to fall out of a wine over time. All right, so now I'm gonna taste the 2009. So right off the bat, tobacco, cedar, but strong, kind of jumping out of the glass. There is some cassis, but it also feels like it might be like blueberry syrup or boysenberry syrup, right? Really thick, really really strong. A little bit confectionery. Not necessarily sweet, but that fruit is very ripe and very consistent and very in my face. So very long finish. So I'm still tasting the wine now. There are some tannins there. The insides of my cheeks are starting to dry out. There's definitely more tannin in this wine and more fruit than the 1928 by far. The 2009, is not a young wine either. It's been like 13 years that this wine has been in bottle. So it has some bottle maturity to it, but not 94 years. And so there's, they're two different wines, drastically different, but they do feel like they come from the same place. A lot of the things that I'm getting in the 2009, 1928 has some resemblance of those, although that they might be faded. Young wines, youthful wines tend, depending on from this area, have big mouthfeels, big rich style mouthfeels. This is less of that. The oak in these wines, here it's more like cedar, here it's more tobacco-esque. So you have those things, cassis. So you're getting like this pencil lead that kind of runs currently through both the wines. I personally would have loved to have tasted this 94-year-old bottle of wine maybe 5 years ago. 5 years ago, the wine probably would have, a totally different expression. I felt like it would have more alcohol, more body and texture to it, and then, hopefully it had a little bit more fruit. But other than that, 1928 kind of holds up to being a great vintage. Now that you opened it, we've tasted it, we've enjoyed it, what do you do with the bottle? You paid for it, so you should get to keep it. In the restaurants that I've worked in the past, we would actually break a bottle like this. So we would crush it just to prevent counterfeiting. So a lot of counterfeiters out there collect old bottles and then they do their concoction and mix it up in there. And so stuff like this and some of those old and rare bottles, if we don't keep them ourselves and keep them on the shelf, we would crush them and they would go out with recycling. So we've opened the wine, we've tasted the wine, we compared it to later vintage of the same wine. And I guess what we're probably all thinking to ourselves, how do you get a bottle of wine like this? A 94-year-old bottle of wine. You won't find this bottle of wine at every place that sells wine. Like, to be fair, you're probably gonna have to go to a specialty shop or visit an auction. Or maybe you know a collector or someone that has it in their cellar or something like that, but there's only a few avenues that you can actually buy a bottle that's sold. It's wine, it's a commodity, it's a collectible thing, so they can change hands from collector to collector or from collector to store, or, I think a big thing, people hand down wine, it's part of their will. They could be bequeathed a collection. This bottle of wine has probably changed hands quite a few times over that span of 100 years. But we actually purchased this wine from a retailer, Acker and Merrill. There's several auction houses of quality. You think about Sotheby's, Christie's, Acker. A lot of times when you buy wine at auction, is probably where you will find wines like this. It's through the reputation of the auction house that you're really depending or leaning on. They back the wine saying they've got it from a great place or an authentic place, and that's kind of how you move. You don't get a certificate. Wine collecting is generally one of those things where it's kind of collect at your own risk. So one way to be able to check to see if it's authentic is checking the cork to make sure the cork matches the label. So this is Château Brainaire, 1928, and we can see that matches the bottle there. I think the hardest part is like figuring out what it's worth. Some people go by retail price, but generally you want to have a reputable auction house come in, take a look at the wines, and then give you a fair price for all of it. A case of this wine sold at Christie's auction house back in 2007 at $6,000, so that was about $500 a bottle, and now it's going for about $800. So you can use those previous prices as reference points to what the wine is worth. The most fascinating thing about collecting wine or that kind of thing is like the only way to consume it is to consume it, right? Art is different, right? You consume art by looking at it. This is like art in one way that you get to look at, but also to enjoy it, you have to consume it. And then once you consume it, it's over. Today we open this bottle of wine. That just means that there's one less bottle of 1928 out there. I mean, today is special. Anytime you get a chance to try wine from 1928, to me, I feel like that's a great day. When should you drink a bottle like this? And to me, I think it's whenever, right? You get to choose if it's a big enough celebration or not. You can experience the bottle of wine and then place it with something that was special or something, some milestone that you were celebrating. This wine has been in the bottle for 94 years. We opened it today. We tasted it. I guess my biggest takeaway, like the wine is great. It's sound. It still has some acidity. I would just say it lacks a little bit on the fruit component and texture to it. But other than that, 1928 kind of holds up to being a great vintage. The wine is still alive and standing. And for me, I would say a little bit more refined in a way, right? It's just interesting to see how it's evolved. I can't express, if you ever have the chance to do something like this, that you should really partake.